The golf ball rollback was supposed to be a simple equipment rule. Instead, it became the match that lit a massive fire inside the PGA Tour locker room. Right now, the biggest names in the sport are not just complaining about losing a few yards off the tee. They are looking at the overall direction of the game and completely rejecting it. Brian Rolapp is sitting in the CEO chair, trying to balance the demands of the USGA with the reality of his own product. The players have finally reached their limit. They see the proposed changes not as a way to save the sport, but as a direct attack on their competitive edge and the history of the tour. The USGA and R&A claim professional distances have grown too much, pointing to data showing average driving distance increases. But players argue this ignores modern course setup. The tour already lengthens the rough, narrows fairways, and speeds up greens weekly. Adding a restricted golf ball is just a lazy way to avoid fixing the actual problem. Furthermore, the proposed model local rule only applies to elite competitions, meaning amateurs still use the current ball, creating a fractured equipment standard. This is not just another minor disagreement over tournament schedules or purse money. The governing bodies are pushing a rule that changes the fundamental tools of the game, while the tour leadership is quietly planning a two-tier system that could downgrade historic events. The players realize that if they accept the rollback now, they lose all their leverage for the future. They are out of patience, and the quiet whispers in the locker room are turning into loud demands. The two-tier system is even more dangerous for the players' bank accounts. If historic events are pushed to a secondary tier, the prize money for those tournaments will inevitably shrink. Sponsors will pay less for a second division event, and the tour will have less money to distribute. For the players ranked outside the top 50 in the world, these mid-tier events are the only way they make a living. Downgrading them essentially cuts the paychecks of the majority of the tour. It creates a massive wealth gap between the superstars at the top and the working-class professionals trying to keep their cards. I truly believe the rollback is a massive mistake that ruins the game. So tell me if you agree the governing bodies are out of touch. Drop your thoughts below and hit subscribe for the real truth about tour politics. With the pressure mounting, someone had to step up and draw a hard line in the sand. The Player Council knew that a scattered group of complaints would be easily ignored by the front office. They needed a unified voice, a massive name to carry the weight of this ultimatum and force the CEO to actually listen. The first person to publicly tear into the plan was Justin Thomas. As a leading voice in the Player Council, he made it crystal clear that changing the golf ball for professionals while letting amateurs play the current version is a terrible idea. He argued that this creates a split in the sport, confusing everyday fans and messing up the equipment everyone buys on Saturday mornings. His message to the front office was simple: if you change the ball, you change the fundamental test of golf. Thomas relies on his ability to flight the ball and generate massive spin. A rolled back ball fundamentally changes his short game, forcing him to alter his swing just to stop it on firm greens. He reminded the front office they are asking the best athletes to play with inferior equipment. It is like asking a Formula One team to put standard street tires on their cars to make the race slower. Thomas made it clear they would rather play longer, harder courses than accept a handicapped ball. They thought a single voice would be enough to stop the machine. They had no idea the CEO was already drafting a much darker plan behind closed doors. Justin Thomas was just the beginning. The real shock came when Rory McIlroy decided to enter the fight. McIlroy has never been shy about speaking his mind on tour politics, but this time his tone was completely different. He was not just criticizing a rule, he was directly challenging Brian Rolapp's leadership and questioning whether the CEO truly understood what the players wanted. McIlroy called the proposed lower tier of events a glorified minor league, and that single phrase sent shockwaves through the golf world. His argument went straight to the heart of the matter. McIlroy pointed out that the PGA Tour's value comes from its history, not from corporate restructuring. Events like the Heritage and the Valero Texas Open have been part of the tour for generations. Downgrading them to a second-tier status would destroy the careers of players who built their resumes at those tournaments. He specifically pointed to the par 4s at Harbor Town, designed to test precise iron shots in the coastal wind. Rolling the ball back makes those holes defenseless, destroying the tournament's unique character. Rory also highlighted the Valero Texas Open, where local fans create an unmatched atmosphere. Downgrading these events tells local communities their support does not matter. It tells the fans who buy tickets that their favorite tournaments are now second class. Loud warnings rarely change corporate policy. The front office simply waited for the media storm to pass, until a legend finally decided to step into the room. When Tiger Woods does not get involved in tour politics, people pay attention. When he does, the entire sport stops. His history with the Player Council is complicated, and he usually prefers to let others handle the public debates. But when the two-tier system threatened to restructure the very tour he helped build into a global brand, Tiger made his position known. He joined Thomas and McIlroy in rejecting the rollback, but his real concern was the schedule. Tiger remembered his 2018 Colonial victory and how local fans treat players like family. He reminded them the Byron Nelson was his first pro event. These tournaments are the foundation of the sport, not just line items on a spreadsheet. Tiger also pointed out the broadcast reality. Networks do not pay billions just for a logo. They pay for the aura of the players. If the top stars are not in the field, casual viewers change the channel. Advertising revenue drops instantly, and network executives immediately complain. His involvement gave the player revolt a level of authority that the front office could not ignore. Business threats are hard to ignore, but Rolapp still believed he could divide the locker room until the current king of golf decided to pick a side. Scottie Scheffler rarely speaks out on politics. He prefers to let his golf do the talking. But as the current #1 player in the world and the most dominant force in the game right now, his silence was no longer an option. When the ultimatum was being drafted, Scheffler stepped forward and added his name. His signature sent the clearest possible message to Brian Rolapp. This was not just a faction of angry veterans. This was the entire locker room, led by the best player on the planet. Scheffler made it clear that the younger generation of stars was not willing to accept a watered-down version of the sport. He understood that the rollback and the schedule changes were two sides of the same coin. Both moves take power away from the players and hand it to executives who have never competed at the highest level. Scottie has dominated by hitting the ball far and playing flawless iron golf. The current ball is crucial to his skill set. A rollback changes the mathematical advantage he built over the field. He also refused to let the tour dictate his schedule. The current model lets top players peak for majors. The two-tier system would force a rigid schedule of downgraded events just to maintain status. Scottie refuses to be treated like a contracted employee. Having the #1 player on board was a massive blow. Yet the CEO still thought the younger generation lacked the experience to execute a real strike. That assumption died the moment Xander Schauffele added his name to the document. As one of the most consistent performers on tour and a recent major champion, Schauffele represents the next generation of leadership. His involvement proved that this revolt spans every age group and every level of the tour hierarchy. Schauffele is known for being steady and reliable. When he commits to a cause, he brings a level of calm authority that grounds the more emotional voices in the room. He reminded the front office that the players are the ones who actually generate the revenue. Without their talent and their draw, the corporate structure means nothing. His strategic mindset helped the Player Council organize their demands into a clear, actionable list that the CEO could not simply dismiss as emotional complaining. Xander uses mid-tier events to fine-tune his game before majors. He needs specific course setups to test his irons. Downgrading those events changes course conditions and ruins his preparation. Xander also noted the FedEx Cup point system rewards competing in a wide variety of events. The two-tier system would disrupt the points race and unbalance the playoffs. He reminded the CEO that if the product on the grass is degraded, the players will refuse to participate. Understanding the rules is one thing. Executing the financial leverage is a completely different battle. The locker room needed a cold, calculating mind to run the numbers. Jordan Spieth was the perfect person to handle the financial details. He understands the business side of golf better than almost anyone in the locker room. Spieth has a long history with the Player Council and knows exactly how the tour's governance works. When the front office tried to hide the details of the two-tier system behind corporate jargon, Spieth tore through the documents. He found the exact clauses that would allow the CEO to downgrade historic events without a full player vote. Spieth mapped out the legal traps and showed the rest of the players exactly how they were being maneuvered. His deep knowledge of the rulebook turned a simple complaint about equipment into a formal legal challenge. He proved that the players were not just reacting to the news. They were actively rewriting the rules of engagement. Spieth dug into the historical Player Council voting records. He found that any major change to the tournament schedule requires a simple majority vote from the players. The front office had been trying to pass the two-tier system through a series of minor administrative tweaks to avoid a full player vote. Spieth exposed this loophole to the entire locker room. He drafted a formal legal response citing the exact sections of the tour regulations that protect the player council's authority. He showed the CEO that if he tried to force the schedule changes without a vote, the players would file a formal grievance and potentially take the issue to arbitration. Spieth turned a corporate memo into a binding legal contract. Paper models cannot stop a unified locker room. The front office still hoped the international stars would break rank and save the schedule. Patrick Cantlay brought a completely different type of energy to the fight. As the former FedEx Cup champion and one of the most respected voices among his peers, Cantlay is known for being measured and deliberate in everything he does. He does not put his name on something unless he has thoroughly analyzed every single angle. Cantlay sat down with the financial advisors and calculated the exact television revenue tied to their individual appearances. He built a detailed spreadsheet showing which events the tour desperately needed them to play and which sponsors would pull their money if they skipped. His cold, hard math proved that the tour's entire financial model relied on their participation. When Cantlay presented those numbers to the player council, the reality of their leverage became undeniable. Cantlay looked at the specific television windows for the downgraded events. He noted that the current broadcast slots generate a specific amount of advertising revenue per hour. If the events are moved to a secondary tier, the networks will move them to less desirable time slots. This means the ad rates will drop by at least 30%. Cantlay also calculated the exact financial hit to the local host committees. The charities that rely on these tournaments for their annual funding would lose millions of dollars. He presented a detailed report showing that the two-tier system would actually cost the tour money in the long run because the sponsors would pull their support. The math proved that the CEO's plan was financially suicidal. If you want to stay updated on every move in this tour power struggle, hit that subscribe button right now so you never miss the real story. European resistance was officially locked in. The CEO was running out of allies, so he prayed the quiet perfectionists would stay out of the politics. Viktor Hovland brought the international perspective to the group. As one of the top European players on tour, his signature showed that this is not just an American issue. The rollback and the two-tier system affect every player who competes on the PGA Tour, regardless of their home country. Hovland made it clear that the global golf community was watching closely. If the PGA Tour allowed the governing bodies to force a split in the equipment rules, it would damage the sport worldwide. His involvement ensured that the international sponsors and broadcast partners understood the global scale of the player revolt. The front office could not simply dismiss this as a group of American players throwing a tantrum. It was a worldwide rejection of the current leadership. Victor pointed out that the DP World Tour in Europe is watching this situation very closely. The European governing bodies are terrified that the PGA Tour's rollback will force them to adopt the same restricted ball. If the European Tour adopts the rule, it will damage their relationship with the global equipment manufacturers. Victor also highlighted the international sponsors who fund the PGA Tour. These global brands want their products associated with the absolute best equipment in the world. If the PGA Tour players are forced to use a watered-down ball, the international sponsors will question the value of their investment. Victor made it clear that this is a global issue that will impact the entire golf industry. Silence from the precision players usually means they are just focusing on their swing. This time, their silence meant they were quietly organizing the final strike. Collin Morikawa is known for his quiet intensity and his absolute precision on the golf course. He rarely speaks to the media about anything other than his next shot. But when the two-tier system threatened the competitive integrity of the tour, Morikawa stepped up. His signature on the ultimatum confirmed that the younger generation of major winners is not willing to accept corporate decisions that undermine their game. Morikawa does not care about the politics, but he cares deeply about the test of golf. He argued that changing the ball and downgrading the events would ruin the pure competition that they dedicate their lives to. His quiet agreement gave the revolt a level of serious, focused intensity that the front office found deeply unsettling. Collin is widely considered the best iron player in the world. His entire game is built on hitting the ball to exact distances and controlling his trajectory. A rolled-back golf ball would completely destroy the precision of his approach shots. He would no longer be able to attack specific pin positions, because the ball would not carry the same distance or stop as quickly on the greens. Collin argued that the USGA is trying to fix a problem that only exists on television. The casual fans do not care if a player hits a drive 320 yards instead of 330 yards. They care about seeing the best players in the world execute the most difficult shots in golf. Collin's quiet but firm stance proved that the rollback ruins the actual test of the sport. Traditionalists had drawn a permanent line in the sand. All that was left was for the ultimate veteran captain to walk into the boardroom and deliver the final blow. Max Homa rounded out the visible leadership of the group with a deeply personal stake in the fight. Homa has built his career on the exact type of historic events that the two-tier system threatens to downgrade. He fought his way onto the tour by winning those traditional tournaments, and he was not going to let a corporate plan erase their importance. His signature represented every player who loves the history and the culture of the sport. Homa made it clear to the front office that the fans do not care about corporate efficiency. They care about the legacy of the events and the stars who play in them. His passionate defense of the tour's culture resonated with the local communities and the sponsors who fund those specific tournaments. Max talked about the specific fan culture at the events he loves. He described the fans who stand in the rough at the Genesis Invitational and the local supporters who volunteer at the American Express. These events have a unique culture that cannot be replicated at the sterile corporate signature events. Max argued that downgrading these tournaments would destroy the soul of the tour. He also pointed out the impact on the local economies. The hotels, restaurants, and small businesses that surround these historic events rely on the tournament week for a massive portion of their annual revenue. Max made it clear that the players are not just fighting for their own paychecks. They are fighting for the communities that support the sport. The entire locker room was finally united, but a list of names is just paper. The real test was who would actually walk into the room and deliver the ultimatum to the CEO. Keegan Bradley brought his leadership experience and his deep understanding of tour tradition to the final meeting. As a playing captain and one of the most respected veterans on tour, Bradley was the perfect person to deliver the final message. He walked into the private meeting at tour headquarters alongside the other 10 players. They did not leak the details to the press. They did not post about it on social media. They simply placed the document on the table. Bradley looked Brian Rolapp in the eye and told him that the future of the PGA Tour depends on how he responds. The message was clear. The players are the product, and the product is refusing to be restructured without its consent. The 11 players had fundamentally changed the power structure of professional golf, and they were not backing down. Keegan did not yell or make a dramatic speech. He simply laid out the facts. He told Rolapp that the players had reviewed the financial data, the legal regulations, and the broadcast contracts. They knew exactly how much leverage they held. Keegan explained that if the CEO did not agree to their demands by the end of the week, the Player Council would issue a public statement rejecting the rollback and the two-tier system. They would also announce that the top players were reviewing their contractual obligations for the downgraded events. Rolapp sat in silence for a long time. He knew that Keegan was not bluffing. The 11 players had done their homework, and they had completely checkmated the front office. Rolapp's response in the days following that meeting revealed just how much pressure the players had applied. He publicly stated that the tour had not made a final decision on the golf ball rollback and that everything was still on the table. That statement might sound neutral to casual fans, but anyone who follows tour politics knows exactly what it means. The CEO was backing away from the USGA's timeline. He was signaling to the players that their ultimatum had been heard. The two-tier system faced an even steeper climb. With 11 of the tour's biggest stars publicly opposed, the broadcast partners started asking difficult questions. The entire financial foundation of the two-tier plan depends on player participation, and the players just made it clear that their participation is not guaranteed. Professional golf is at a crossroads, and the decisions made in the next 12 months will shape the sport for decades. The players have the upper hand, and every fan of this sport should be paying very close attention to what happens next. The USGA and R&A are now in a very difficult position. They spent years developing the rollback plan and publicly committing to its implementation. If the PGA Tour refuses to adopt the model local rule, the governing bodies will have to decide whether to force it on their own championships. If they do, the players will have to use different balls for the majors and the tour events. This logistical nightmare would anger the equipment manufacturers and confuse the fans. The R&A is already facing heavy criticism from the European players and the global media. The PGA Tour's refusal to back the rollback has completely isolated the governing bodies. They are now realizing that they cannot force a rule change if the actual product refuses to play by it.